Hello, my name is Chrissy Champagne, and you are listening to Residue, a true crime podcast dedicated to keeping you paranoid. Today, I will be sharing a story with you that will prove that even living in the safest, quaintest, most beautiful, quietest town, a town where everyone knows everyone, there is always the potential for dangerous situations. And today we will be talking about the case of Sean Googin out of Cazenovia, New York. As always, listener discretion is advised. Please listen with caution. Did you know that the average person can unknowingly walk past 36 murderers in their entire lifetime? Just think about how many people you see every single day. Even the slightest exchange, like going through a drive-through window, going to the bank, talking to a bank teller, having somebody stand behind you in line at the grocery store. You don't know these people, and they don't know you. Nobody understands what everyone else is capable of. There are some people in this world that have secrets so deeply hidden, and we can never really truly know who the real scary people are. I know you've all seen a segment on the news or on Dateline where they'll be interviewing the friends, families, coworkers of the suspect, and everyone is always like, no way, I never could have believed that this person could have done that. That's why we have all been taught to trust our gut and just always keep one eye open. I know myself, I am very paranoid. I wanted to start this podcast because I have been fascinated by true crime since I was a child. So my brain has always been conditioned to always be on the lookout for any kind of danger. And with this podcast, what I wanted to do was help others learn that you don't have to live your life in a state of always being scared. I know I say stay paranoid, but what I mean is be aware of your surroundings, trust your gut, never go to the second location, and remember these stories. When I was younger, I watched an episode of Oprah, and she talked about the fact that we don't want to always think about the bad things that could happen to us in life, but the bad things are there, and they could happen, and they do happen. Something she said always stuck with me, and Oprah said, if you think about certain situations that you could possibly be put in. Now, let's say it is the fact that you're leaving the mall one night, late at night, and say a man comes up to you with a gun and he says, get into the car. What are you going to do? Are you going to run? Are you going to get in the car and go to the second location? Are you going to just freeze? We never truly know what we will do when we are in that situation, but if we have thought about these situations over and over in our own brains and we've come up with solutions to what we would do, then there is the possibility that when that situation hopefully never happens to us, but if it ever does, we've already come up with an escape plan. And that would give you a little less of a freeze situation if your brain has already thought about this. It's the whole train your brain scenario. I have struggled with how to tell this next case that I am about to tell you. I am the mother of a teenage boy, so this case is very difficult for me to talk about. I feel that it is difficult for anyone to hear. I decided to tell the story because it is another cautionary situation where we can all see that even living in the safest of the safest towns in our area, things can still go wrong. On the other side, I also think that this case is another example of a town pulling together, fighting for justice, and non-stop supporting the family. a true community in Cazenovia, New York. The town of Cazenovia was established in 1793. It was founded by John Lincklean, an agent of the Holland Land Company, and it was named after Theophile Cazenove, Lincklean's supervisor. I adore Cazenovia, New York. I had my first date with my husband at Cazenovia Lake. I got engaged at Cazenovia Lake. I got married at Cazenovia Lake. I love this town. It is my dream to one day have a lake house there. It is like a storybook community. At its meeting on April 5th, 2021, the Board of Trustees adopted this following statement for Cazenovia. The village of Cazenovia is committed to being a welcoming and inclusive community. We recognize the rights of all of those who reside in or visit our community to be respected and to live their lives with dignity, free of discrimination based on faith, race, ethnicity, sexuality, gender identity, mental health, socioeconomic status, national origin, or immigration status. The village's leadership will strive to set the example in promoting fair treatment for all, including, but not limited to, persons of color and the LGBTQ community. We call upon our citizens to reject all forms of hatred and intolerance, and we commit ourselves as a village to respect and promote diversity in our community and to be good neighbors to all. Dreamy, right? On July 3rd, 1992, the murder of Sean Googin would become the first in the then 199-year history of Cazenovia. This murder stirred up fear in this community and went unsolved for nearly 9 years. At 15 years old, Sean Googin was working at a local restaurant, the Lincklean restaurant in Cazenovia. He worked as a dishwasher. And on this night, July 3rd, 1992, Sean was going to finish up work around 11 p.m. at night and then take the 10-minute walk down to Gypsy Bay on Cazenovia Lake. He was going to meet his family here because they were having their annual fireworks celebration to celebrate the 4th of July. The restaurant was only a half a mile from the inn that Sean worked at, but Sean never showed up to the lake that night to meet his family. Sean was described as a hardworking, outgoing young man. He worked at the restaurant with executive chef Michael S. Baum. I wanted to read to you a little something that Michael Baum wrote about Sean Googin because I think it's going to give you a clearer image of the kind of person that Sean was. Michael Baum wrote, I started my culinary career at the Lincklean House in Cazenovia, New York in the year 1990. While I was working there, I had seen many people come and go. Many were high school students who had their entire future ahead of them, and they were unsure about where they wanted to go in life. But there was one young gentleman who was hired to do dishes that I will never forget. This same person I grew to love and enjoy being with in the kitchen. His name was Sean Googin. Sean had a gift of making a person laugh. Out of nowhere, he would do the silliest of things, like taking a rubber glove and pull it over his head just for kicks. Sean just wanted to make people laugh. I have never felt so close to any kitchen personnel like I did with Sean. He was just an all-around great guy. You would never believe that he was only 15 years old. New York State senior investigator Dennis Doherty was actually hanging out with Sean's parents at the lake that night. There was a carnival in town. This was a huge event for Cazenovia. It was the annual 4th of July fireworks night, so almost everyone in town was at the lake that night. Dennis Doherty recalls that his wife told him she had been talking with Sean's mother, Jan, and she was a little worried because Sean had not shown up yet. She said that she asked Sean if he wanted a ride, and he said, "It's a short distance, I'll be fine, don't worry about me." The festivities continued on, but Sean's family was becoming more and more concerned. Every single time a clock ticked, we became more concerned, said Sean's mother, Jan. It was around 2 a.m. when Sean's father calls Dennis Doherty. He tells him, Sean is still not home. We need to retrace his steps. We have to go out and look for Sean. And that is exactly what Dennis Doherty and Bob Googin did. It wasn't until the next morning that 2 boaters discovered Sean Googin's body. He had bruises on his neck. He was also wearing his army fatigue jacket, and there were large flat rocks stuffed inside of the pockets. Police searched the area where Sean's body was found, and they find a matted down area in a flower bed. Assuming that a body had been thrown into that flower bed and later removed. Also at this scene, they found a rubber ball, which family and friends said Sean always carried with him. They also find a Timex watch with a gold face and a silver band, but the band was broken off. And the police think at this point that the suspect must have been wearing this watch as he tried to strangle Sean, and Sean tore it off of the person's wrist. Police also find that a canoe was stolen off of the shoreline right near this flower bed. So they do start to believe that the suspect used this canoe to drop Sean's body off. There was only one eyewitness account, and this person said they saw 3 young men in their late teens, early 20s being involved in what they called horseplay. He said that 2 of the men were in a fight. One of the men ran into a wooded area. A second man followed, but the third person that was in this group ran away from the scene completely. This eyewitness account is going to start making police think that maybe this was some friends of Sean's. So students at Cazenovia High School are now being interrogated and fingerprinted. They are also now going to fingerprint and interrogate all of the carnival workers that were there in town that day, because they were all from out of state. But all students, all friends, all of the carnival workers, they are all cleared. The only other piece of evidence that police had was a coworker told them that as Sean was leaving work that night, he said to this coworker, "Hey, do you want to know what I'm going to do tonight?" And the coworker said, "No, I don't care what you're doing tonight." Police believe that if he would have let Sean tell him what he was doing that night, that maybe the police would have had any kind of clue as to where Sean was going, if it was anywhere other than the lake that night. But police are now going to realize that they have no leads, they have no suspects, and Sean's case is going to remain open. And for the next 9 years, the town of Cazenovia would erect a monument and a memorial to Sean. They would also no longer have an annual carnival to celebrate the 4th of July. For the next 9 years, police are going to chase over 2,000 leads. They're going to check the DNA of at least a half a dozen suspects, including several of those carnival workers who were in the village that weekend. In April of 2001, police would get a DNA match. DNA found at the scene of Sean Googin's murder would match the DNA of an inmate staying at the Wendy Correctional Facility in Batavia. He was serving 5 years for a 1999 sodomy charge. In late 1999, Jeffrey Clark was arrested and convicted of sodomizing a 14-year-old boy in Oneida, New York. So who is Jeffrey Clark? Jeffrey Clark would plead innocent, but pre-trial documents are going to reveal a lot about this man's childhood. One of these documents was called A Psychosocial History of Jeffrey Clark, and this document profiled Jeffrey Clark from birth to prison. It cites family court records, interviews, even Jeffrey Clark's diary entries. In an article written for the Post-Standard in Syracuse, author Tom Murphy is going to describe Portrait of an Accused Killer Raped as a Child. He says these documents give glimpse into the man charged with killing teen Sean Googin. This article starts out by saying, at age 3, Jeffrey Clark lived in filth and his hair started falling out. A year later, a man may have raped him. At age 6, family members teased Clark because he still wore diapers. His criminal history started in his teens and then drug abuse followed. Jeffrey Clark stayed in diapers until age 6 or 7 due to incontinence, and the profile notes that many people, including family members, made fun of him because of it. About 8 years later, police arrest Jeffrey Clark, who is now 15 years old, for burglaries done with a 13-year-old accomplice. It is stated that Jeffrey Clark had a horrible time in high school. He was bullied, he was pushed around. He even wrote a diary entry about wanting to commit suicide. He wrote, "I'm having a hard time trying to talk to people and keep a relationship with people longer. I really don't know how I kept friends before." This was from a 1987 diary entry. He graduated high school in 1987 at age 20, and he was 174th out of his graduating class of 211. Records from the Madison County Mental Health Department state that Jeffrey Clark reported a recollection of having been sexually abused as a child. These tests that they did on Jeffrey Clark found that he had a low IQ of 89 and that he preferred fantasy and daydreaming to any kind of social interaction. The report stated that he retreats from confused and painful reality due to his lack of social skills and difficulty understanding other people. In the 1990s, Jeffrey Clark reported encounters with aliens who could, quote, tap his mind. He even placed magnets and batteries on the floor to keep all of these voices away from him. In the summer of 1994, 2 years after Sean Googin was murdered, Jeffrey Clark entered rehabilitation and he steered clear of drugs and alcohol. But in 1996, Jeffrey is diagnosed as a paranoid schizophrenic. He would enter emergency room hospitals complaining that his head hurts everywhere, that his bones seem to be shifting. He even entered an emergency room in 1996 complaining that he heard voices and wanted to kill himself. Medical records from 1999 are also going to show that Jeffrey recalled having a vision of John Lennon and Yoko Ono, and he stated that he spoke to Yoko Ono and he believes that John Lennon will come back to life. In September of 1999, police will charge Jeffrey Clark with sodomizing a 14-year-old boy. He will tell the police that he did lure the victim into his Lakeport trailer with the promise of some Woodstock tapes. The young victim would tell police that Jeffrey pointed a gun to his head and told him that if he didn't kiss him, he would never see his family again. In April of 2001, when police finally uncover that Jeffrey Clark was the man connected with Sean Googin's death, they now have the DNA evidence and they are putting together a detailed confession that Jeffrey Clark gave them. In this confession, Jeffrey is going to say that he was high on marijuana and crack the night that he lured Sean Googin off of a sidewalk and into a dark yard, and this is where he assaulted him. Maybe this article was written to try to give a reason as to why this would happen, but it didn't really go over too well with the community. And I wanted to read for you a couple of the comments that were left after this article was published in the Post-Standard. One of the comments reads, "Poor Jeffrey. Don't blame him. His family was dysfunctional. Here's a news flash for them. Sean Googin is still dead and the Clark family is still dysfunctional. Look what compassion for the criminal got the Googin family." Another commenter wrote, "I am sorry Jeffrey Clark was dealt a bad hand in life. I am sorry the system failed him. I am sorry his family had no sense of moral responsibility when it came to raising kids. Honestly, I would have had compassion for him if I met him as a child. My heart would have broken for him. If I knew him, I would go out of my way to be of some help. But the moment he crossed the line from victim to abuser would have been the moment my compassion dried up. Period." Jeffrey Clark would be sentenced to 23 years to life. And after his sentencing, Judge Biagio DeStefano would say to Jeffrey Clark, You are every parent's nightmare. You are society's worst fear. What you did that night is the very reason the death penalty exists today. It is this court's hope that you never walk out of prison. Sean's friend, Michael S. Baum, wrote this in his memoir to Sean Googin. New York State Police are getting the details in order so that this person will spend many years behind bars. But my thoughts are this. I am glad for Sean and his parents that they can finally rest, knowing that Sean's murderer has been found and he is being charged for Sean's murder. No matter what our judicial system does, it will not be harsh enough, nor will it bring my friend Sean back. A final note, and this is to my friend Sean Googin, wherever you are. I miss you, my friend. I love you, and I will see you again someday. Thank you so much for listening to Residue every week. I appreciate all of the support. I love the sweetest direct messages I'm getting and the sweetest reviews. It is amazing, and I cannot thank you enough. Please join me on Instagram if you have not already. It is Residue Podcast, and you can also find me on Facebook at Residue, a true crime podcast. I also made my own little website. It is residupodcast.com. And the best thing that you can possibly do for me is just share everything. Please, just share on your social media, share with your friends, share with your family. I completely produce Residue on my own. I edit, I research, I write, I host, and it means the world to me when I get feedback the way that I have been getting it. Thank you so much. I will be starting a Patreon soon, so you will hear more details about that in the future. But until next time, I hope you guys stay safe and stay paranoid.